Happy Wednesday. Hey, have you seen those memes that are like
Never. I've never seen a meme.
Happy dog. We got a happy dog. You know when they're
do you know that you sing this song about every 30 episodes?
Have I said that on the stream before? All right. Well, maybe we'll make it a ritual. Every 30 episodes or so, I'll sing this. I'll sing the song and do a little puppy dance.
A little dog dance?
My little Frenchie is like that. He picks up leaves. Like there's these huge leaves here. And he picks them up and he just carries them and his whole butt shakes and he'll carry it for the whole walk. One leaf, and he can't see because it's in front of his face. Like he's not very smart, but super cute. Anyways, episode 58, go fund yourself. JD Gagnon here, my good friend Kiara. How are you?
I'm back. You're stuck with me again.
You're back. Yeah, yesterday we had Christine from Tashi. That was fun.
Seemed fun, but I heard you didn't talk about all the Cosmos news.
Yeah, talk about irony. Somehow we got going on geopolitics and I don't know.
Who wants to hear about that?
Everybody.
We're going to talk about Cosmos. We're going to talk about Cosmos and why it's in the news. Just kind of give some background on Cosmos. That's where we're going to start. But I was looking at news today, and we could go one of two directions. We could do lots more geopolitics, or we could just talk about DeFi. So we're just doing DeFi today. We're going to do Cosmos. We're going to do Polkadot. We're going to talk about Aave on Metis, MakerDAO. Microsoft isn't really DeFi, but Onyx is kind of DeFi-ish. And then Quadriga, and then we've got a little bit of FUD on Bitcoin mines, which I don't know. People seem to like FUD on Bitcoin mines. I don't know why, but we're going to talk about it.
That's pretty funny. Let's do it. In my head, when that song plays, I can see someone going at the end. You know, the anyway. Okay, welcome back. So quick shout out to our friends at Opolis. This is like probably one of the coolest shirts ever if you're into like symbology and stuff like that. I just love it. And it's also a great fit, really soft. So fat fingers. I did it twice.
You're just really excited about ology. You wanted to play them out, like.
Yeah, it's Opolis. Opolis, yeah. But maybe we'll do a theme song for them one day if they send me more merch. Anyways,
it's
big
cool
fan.
Shirt. I really dig it, actually.
Yeah, I'm a big fan. It's kind of cool because like often you have like the pattern on the back and just the name on the front, but it's kind of like the other way around. And I kind of like that. Like it almost feels like an Iron Man. Like I feel like Iron Man.
Are you powerful right now? Like DeFi
Maybe.
powerful?
Super FUD powerful. Power fuddy. I'm power fuddy for today. All right, where are we starting?
We're going to talk about Cosmos. I know you talked about Cosmos a little bit yesterday, and you talked about the general actual news of somebody launching on Cosmos and things happening. But I want to talk about Cosmos because there's just a lot of weird news about it. If you try to look up Cosmos news, it becomes very confusing. So I wanted to just do a little mini overview about what the sweet heck Cosmos is doing and why people care about it.
Yeah, it's Cosmos is a bit of an enigma in the space. Like there is an incredible amount of developer activity on Cosmos, and the Cosmos Foundation is like almost at the like polar end of tech versus BD narrative. And they're on the tech side. So Cosmos has some incredible technology, but they really struggled, and we're going to talk about this, I think, today, but they really struggled with their token because the token really has effectively no utility.
Wait, but hasn't there been a huge price surge?
Yeah, there's been a price surge for a few reasons, in my opinion, not financial advice, et cetera. We can talk about that in a minute, but they did come out with like Atom 2.0, like new tokenomics, which isn't really that exciting. But all of that being said, in terms of like meaningfully differentiated L1s, comparatively to all the other L1s and L2s, it's pretty awesome. It's really an L0, a layer 0, which is really cool. And I think part of this surge, and we're going to talk about the Coin Journal article, I think, first, but one of the things that I think is most exciting about Cosmos is they're doing a lot of things before it's a catastrophe. So what's really cool about this one, I don't know if you want to tee this one up or if you want me to just roll with it, but go ahead. I feel like I completely left you in the dark on this one.
No,
Anyways.
it's good. My internet's all ruggy, so talk about Cosmos.
All right. So Dimension and Evmos core teams launched this IBC-enabled EVM rollup. Let's not get like too deep into why that's important or why that's like technically cool, because it is kind of cool. But what I think is more interesting about this is already starting to address scalability on EVMs, because there's only a certain amount of stuff you can fit in the contracts on Solidity on a main EVM chain. And then there's only so much block space on an EVM chain. And so what this does is this allows for similar to, you know, what originally Polygon was trying to achieve early on. And then, you know, recently with ZK's on Optimism, Arbitrum, different ways of doing things, slightly both of those. But the whole point there is to take things that don't necessarily need to be written to the main chain every block, but rather can batch and write them. Anyways, this is important because it's one of the first kind of iterations here on meaningful scalability. And so I think that's really interesting before it became a huge problem. And so this is like what, as a builder, as an entrepreneur, what I think is cool about Cosmos is they seem to be incredibly forward-looking on this kind of stuff. I mean, not to discount other L1s. I mean, obviously, I'm a huge fan of Avalanche and the way that they have evolved and are building tooling to expand. But Cosmos has kind of been this like multiple zone thesis from like day one, really. Not day one, but at where Avalanche first started on the C chain, which is an EVM chain, and then now they're doing subnets. Cosmos has really leaned into this like app chain thesis and you know, different zones and so on. So yesterday we talked about shared security, and that's really interesting, the first iteration of that, because that allows teams to develop app specific or retail specific chains, which is cool. And then this allows for people that don't need their own chain, but have maybe really high transaction volumes or something, they can deploy on EVM rollups now on Cosmos, which is really cool. So I don't know. Do you have any thoughts about that, or are you still getting rugged over there?
It's still pretty bad. But one of the things that I thought was interesting about Cosmos is how many different networks there are within and how some of them are so big name. I mean, like Binance is participating on the Cosmos network, Kava's on the Cosmos network, maybe in their own ways because they might have their own networks as well or their own ecosystems as well. So I'm curious to see from a social perspective how Cosmos can support so many different hubs.
Yeah. Again, like as an L0, in effect, layer 0, it's not the best term, but it's really interesting because I mean, Terra Luna was a Cosmos zone also. And most people didn't actually think about that. Like most people just make some assumptions that it's kind of its standalone ecosystem, which is a testament, I think, to how important these types of L0s will be for future, you know, development and growth of the space. Because instead of having 10 million separate networks, you know, all their own blockchains and all with their own challenges and tooling and all this other stuff, there's a lot of shared resources that you can get from something like Cosmos or Avalanche. In Cosmos case, IBC is pretty important, inter-blockchain communication. And it's really important for, you know, the connectivity and composability and interoperability of all these Cosmos zones. It's pretty amazing. Like it really is. You know, when we think about abstracting a lot of the complexity out of blockchain platforms from a user-facing perspective, this is how you have to do it. Like you have to have these really efficient, powerful communication structures and connectivity items and tooling, so that the user, it's not so disjointed where you've got to bridge from A to B and then swap into a different asset to bridge from B to C and all this other crap. And it's like fees everywhere and smart contract risk everywhere and all this other crap. What's really cool about ecosystems like Cosmos is the IBC enables a lot of that where you don't actually need to bridge, or you don't need to do a lot of these things in the same way. So very exciting.
Yeah. Cosmos cross-chain focus is kind of their value add. And in a way, they haven't set themselves up in such a manner that all of these different ecosystems are going to cause brand dilution for them. Where you see some of that with Avalanche, where Avalanche was so supportive socially of their projects that when a project fails or something bad happens, that reflects on the Avalanche brand. I haven't seen that same thing happen within the Cosmos branding, which perhaps is because of the cross-chain ability, which perhaps is because of they have more of these like zones and hubs, right, as opposed to just projects and subnets. Yeah. But so if we have all these good things about Cosmos, why are we still seeing so much fuddy news? When you try to look up Cosmos news, it's like, I mean, there's the typical ones that say price surge, but will it drop? But there's still quite a lot of negative sentiment around, or just uncertain sentiment around Cosmos. Is it super complicated? Why would people still be so fuddy on it?
Yeah, I mean, there's still some work to be done. Obviously, like IBC has some work that's still being done, and some of the challenges they've abated now as of like this week. So some of the challenges with respect to shared security and shared economic security, and now a potential problem with network congestion on the EVM chains. You know, they're starting to kind of knock out some of those potential challenges in a pretty impressive way. I think it's really important, and you know, we'll tee up the Amber Crypto op-ed.
I didn't know if you wanted to talk about it because it is so funny.
Yeah, it's funny, but I think it's worth explaining the two potential perspectives on this. And so I think from a builder's perspective, Cosmos is really exciting. Like the technology of Cosmos and what it enables and the flexibility is really quite interesting, and really forward looking. I think I think it's, you know, that type of approach technically is going to really inform kind of the future of how these blockchains and ecosystems evolve. So there's that side. Now the other side is your token holders, and that's unfortunately your most vocal minority often. Are the people flooding when they hold a token and the token's not going 1000x like they expect it to in a week or something. And so I feel like this has kind of been a thing for a few years. Like Atom, the token really had no use case before. And so during the last bull run, it didn't go bananas like everything else because people just didn't see the value in the token. And so then they updated to Atom 2.0 or whatever, which in my opinion was an interesting attempt, but not far enough. And we can maybe dissect that another day. But anyways, long story short, I think there's like the investor perspective and then the builder perspective. And I think from an investment perspective, Atom is an interesting one because it's hard to convince yourself to get on board to be a meaningful, long-term and sizable investor. I think the flip side of that though is investing in these zones, you know, Evmos, Kava, Osmosis, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Investing in those or in new zones as they pop up or in new projects that become app-specific chains in Cosmos. That I think is the investable opportunity. And then I think we're going to see a hell of a lot more of that soon. I think we're going to see a lot more of those things. Again, now that they're, you know, evolving IBC and now that they're working on some of these shared security items, I think it really just opens the doors to a lot broader swath of potential adoption. So, I mean, this is fuddy. I think I'm a little fuddy on the Atom token directly. But I think the ecosystem is not going anywhere. They'll have to figure out the economics at some point to make it like viable. But I think it's a really, really cool technology, and I'm pretty excited about it. One final thought on that. I think part of why you see not a hell of a lot of involvement from Cosmos Foundation and so on in really any co-marketing or any is because they don't do any of that. Like they just focus on tech, which has been a criticism of a lot of people. And so there's two schools of thought on this one, in that some people just want to hear like, let's get all the news out. Let's tell everybody about all the stuff that's coming up down the road. And like, let's hype the hell out of things and get the token to pump. That's one poll. The other poll is let's just let the tech speak for itself. Ideally, you're kind of somewhere in the middle where you're getting people excited because it is a narrative-driven space generally still, but you're also really focused on building the tech. It's not all hype and no substance. In this particular case, that they're very far on the tech. Let the tech speak for itself end of that spectrum, and so yeah, they really don't get involved. I mean, in a few years from now, I think we'll probably see that there's a lot more success of the ecosystems that slow and steady and don't overpromise things. At least that's my perspective. I like when there's some narrative and news and proper marketing and PR and thought leadership and so on. But I'd rather see slow, steady, like let's just focus on what makes this a better ecosystem and what's long-term sustainable. And so we'll see. We'll see where Cosmos goes. Man, you are getting...
Now you know.
Now you know. I was going to say you're getting super rugged today. So
yeah, I super am. But okay, we're just doing DeFi news for Degens for the rest of the show. We've got 14 minutes and we've got 6 stories. So you only get 2 minutes of story, JD.
2 minutes of story.
2 minutes of story. And it should be pretty easy. So the first one I'm really funny on. The first one is Polkadot scores massive industry leader. There's no actual news. Like, I guess they just came out and said, we're going to do something cool. And everyone thought that was good enough to report on. I did a little bit of digging. Polkadot is going to be working with Deloitte on KYC and KYB, which is super cool. But also, like, the news is that Polkadot is going to have a partner and they don't want to tell you who it is yet. So weird news story.
Yeah. Polkadot's a weird one. I mean, obviously we were involved in Moonwell, and Moonwell's on Moonbeam, which is a Polkadot parachain. Polkadot's been an interesting one. Much of the tooling and stuff for the Polkadot parachains to communicate with each other has been really clunky. So where Cosmos is really leaning into IBC and a lot of these like shared security things, the whole process of parachains has been kind of a hot mess. So they did these crazy crowdfunding things to lock up enough DOT, which is really why DOT has stayed as stable as it has, in my opinion, because a lot of it's locked up so that they can maintain their parachains. Now that was at the beginning. Now you can get a parachain for next to nothing. So it'll be interesting when some of those original parachains come up for renewal. I think it's every 2 years, how that's going to change. The DOT pricing and all that stuff. But DOT it's an interesting one. The tech just isn't there yet, in my opinion. And they also, again, this is just my opinion, but they also have a challenge with their foundation really not wanting to engage the growth of the parachains at all. And like even support it from liquidity mining perspective. They do, but very reluctantly.
You're being so funny, JD.
No. I'm trying to be real. I'm trying to be real here. Now, having said that, Deloitte has partnered with many blockchains.
Yes.
So I mean, they're doing different things on different blockchains, but obviously their consulting arm is huge. That they have really, really long tentacles pretty much in every area of the US and global economies. And so it is exciting. It is good news. Inking big partnerships like that are critical to any ecosystem. I'm not sure it's worth all the hype that they're trying to put behind it, but they're trying to build some good narrative and good for them. I mean, you got to do something.
That was really funny. So hype up this next one, okay?
Yep.
Aave on Metis. I like Aave on Metis. I like getting interoperability. I like seeing things scale out. I think that's pretty exciting. And they're also talking about how they'll have new features like batch flash loans and new collateral types, but also credit delegation. And I'm not sure how credit delegation is different than borrow lend.
Yeah. I don't want to speak too out of turn on that one because I'm not 100% sure what the credit delegation means. As far as I understand, you can collateralize one wallet and offer your collateral to another,
That's right.
Like as backing for the other. I think that just probably has to do with the way people are managing their wallets. It's a pretty interesting adaptation, I think. And it should work nicely. What's interesting about this is, I mean, Aave is kind of Aave will go wherever ecosystems incentivize them to go, generally speaking. And this has kind of been their MO, is to go to, once an ecosystem matures to a certain point, then Aave comes in, sucks up a bunch of liquidity mining, usually. And well, I'm a little funny on this also, but I'm just a huge fan of Aave. They're a pioneer in the space. I think Metis is an awesome ecosystem. We've talked about Metis quite a bit. I should have worn my Metis shirt today just because we were talking about Metis. But this is huge. This is huge for Metis. It does catapult Metis into the spotlight a little bit. They have a great community, but I think this is just another step. Getting some blue chip projects to launch there is pretty critical. We'll have to see.
On blue chip, did you see the Microsoft, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan news with Onyx?
Yeah.
I feel like this isn't news. I thought we already knew this. I remember reading about it before, but maybe they have something new to say.
Yeah, this is interesting. And I think this is really good for the space as a whole. We need to see incumbent participation because, again, the vast majority of lobby against crypto and blockchain currently is likely coming from incumbents, coming from the banking and finance sectors in America. And so to see, some of the industry giants, so to speak, Goldman, Microsoft, JP, and others building a blockchain, I think is interesting. It'll be, again, there's only a certain amount of information on Onyx that's been provided, and we'll have to wait and see. Originally, they were trying to keep it exclusive to their private client networks and so on, which is not quite as exciting because it's just more of the same in terms of, it's very compartmentalized and so on. But we'll have to see. I think at the very least, it's great. It's a great sign for the space. I'm a big fan of this one.
Okay, this next one we might have a little bit more to say about. I'm really stoked about it, but MakerDAO has released their real-world finance module. So you can use it for invoicing, real estate, intellectual property. You have new ways to build collateral. I really like seeing new use cases for DeFi, and I really like seeing them cross over with not only Web 2, but real world, so that our parents can understand what's going on. But I think this is part of that mass adoption. This is like when we talk about spritz finance and how you can pay your bills with your crypto finally. With MakerDAO, now you actually have a real tangible option for real estate, or you have a real tangible option for purchasing something that is in your world and isn't just an NFT with an artifact, but is actually something in real life.
Yeah. This is really cool. It'll be interesting to see how it actually operates and if it's successful. I think on the surface, it's pretty exciting. Anytime that we're seeing major players like a Maker participate in different types of collateralization, I'm not sure if this is super geared towards like the average everyday retail user, although that's kind of what the claim is. I think the underwriting burden on this is non-zero. If you're going to lend against, we'll call them exotic assets that aren't natively on chain. This is really interesting. I think it's someone with the resources and reputation has to start participating in that kind of bridging of debt from blockchain to real world. And so this is exciting. There's no one better really than Maker, especially because of the way that they're backing DAI, right? They're trying to diversify how they're backing DAI, and this becomes a bit of a loan book. My other concern here is that these loans, they have to be really sophisticated in how they manage their loan book and their collateral book, because that's one of the challenges Tether had with like commercial paper in China and like all this other shit that was super illiquid. In this case, and again, I don't know all the particulars in this case. What are the opportunities to call a loan if you run into problems? What type of position does that put someone in? If they have, as just a broad example, if someone has their mortgage or they've borrowed against their house, they use their house as collateral for DAI, and all of a sudden you call the loan, chances are that money's not just sitting in their bank account for fun, or the assets aren't sitting in their wallet for fun. They're probably using it somewhere. And so anyways, it can cause a whole bunch of kind of contagion problems, similar to the regional banking crisis in the US. Totally different reasons why the two things would be the case. But just something that I think is really interesting. I'm super excited that they're doing this, but cautiously optimistic.
I feel like this also becomes difficult for regulation. Like, are they setting themselves up to follow that we're going to be securities or commodities, or are they kind of ignoring that? And I don't know. There's a lot to think about there too.
Yeah. So, I mean, the prevailing argument, not an attorney, this is not legal advice. This is just anecdotal from things I've heard and been told. But especially for lending, I mean, you really are skirting the line regarding banking regulations if you start to have any discretion and underwriting, and there's some subjectivity in what I pronounced that completely wrong. That's weird. Subjectivity in how these things are being approved or denied. Like the argument that we've all used up to date anyways, as to why we think we're okay from a banking regulation perspective, is that smart contracts require absolutely zero human intervention. So the code is there. We're not involved. There's no custody. There's no, active management of those loans. And Maker is now, I mean, and it's always kind of been that way, where they've collateralized quite a few different things. And there's a whole process around it. I'm with you on this one. It'll be interesting to see how they navigate. I think this will be a huge litmus test also for how regulators are going to approach this, because this is a very high profile, pivot. So
Absolutely.
Pretty interesting.
So our final two are out of Canada, and I usually try to not lump us together, but crypto Canada hasn't been great lately. So when I try to put all of our funny things at the end, it ends up being super, super Canada. But we've got Quadriga, and they're going to start distributing their funds, but I can't find out how much money it is. Like, it's not announced anywhere. I found phrases like they lost between 190 million to 215 million. And I found that they're going to be distributing funds, and they have between 7.4 million and 30 million to distribute. I don't really know what it is.
Yeah, so there's a really interesting Netflix documentary on this. You're completely rugged and frozen again, but there's a really cool Netflix documentary on this, if anybody's so inclined, from the perspective of the people that lost money. I actually know a few people personally that lost a fairly sizable amount of money, because at the time in 2019, Quadriga was like growing at an explosive rate, and pretty much all Canadians, that was like the primary platform that anybody in Canada was using. Including people that are Canadian but living abroad. So there's a lot of people that were actually living in the US that were impacted by this too. What's crazy is the circumstances surrounding the supposed death of the founder. And like there's just so much like crazy, weird stuff going on. Like he died from like some stomach infection in India, and no one knows where the private keys are, apparently. Like it's kind of strange. Like I mean, apparently he died, but there's like no autopsy. They didn't do an autopsy apparently. And like, there's the coroner's report, like you can't get it. And like all this weird shit. I might be misstating some of those facts. It's been a minute since I watched the documentary, but yeah, this is interesting. I mean, if there's only 7 to 30, even 30 million is less than 10 cents on the dollar of their total assets. Like it's kind of shit. Obviously it totally sucks. These are like the weird things that should never happen, which is why I've been saying since prior to 2019 that we need some regulation in the space. Again, I don't necessarily think that we need to over-regulate the space, but there's got to be something. There's got to be some checks and balances. I mean, this is another example, kind of like FTX, right? It's just a smaller scale version of FTX, where because there's no meaningful governance oversight, and certain other functions of regulation that existed at the time, things like FTX and Quadriga can happen. That would never happen at a regulated bank. So, I mean, as a space, we need to get our shit together and up the bar a little bit, in my opinion. So, anyways, this is interesting. We'll have to see. I think people are going to be pretty. Bless you. people are going to be pretty disappointed in this if, you know, they get 10 cents on the dollar. I guess it's better than nothing, but what this also says, which is kind of unfortunate, is that if they're distributing assets, they're getting close to concluding the wind down probably of this, which means, in my opinion, they probably feel like they don't have all the information or any information to pursue this any further, which really is unfortunate, because that means, you know, that money is possibly lost forever, or maybe not. And so what I suspect will happen is it'll be like 10 years or something, and then miraculously it'll move. But apparently there was like another partner involved in Quadriga. I can go on.
You gotta watch the documentary. It's worth it.
Yeah, like there's another partner involved that like is kind of historically a bit of a shady individual, and they don't know where he is, and I don't know.
All right.
The whole thing is kind of crazy.
We'll have a viewing party on Twitter. It'll be fun. Our last one is about Bitcoin mining.
Yeah.
So in Medicine Hat, Alberta, where we're from.
I actually lived there for like the majority of my childhood outside of there, but
I'm so sorry that happened to you.
Yeah,
maybe you lived on this farm, this Bitcoin mining facility.
Actually, I lived like probably a mile from it. Yeah. I'm serious. And it's really interesting, actually. I mean, Bitcoin mining it was something that was all the rage for the longest time, and you kind of don't hear much about it anymore because, you know,
that's not true. We talked about it last week with Andy.
Yeah, you and Andy talked about it, but you don't hear about it. It's not really something that's like front and center. Like the majority of people that are making money mining Bitcoin now are like huge companies that have these huge operations, and, you know, the capital expenditure to get something up to a meaningful profitability is a lot. It's a lot of money. Anyways, this what this, I guess, outlines is that you can have all the best technology in the world, but you're still at the mercy of the power grid, and like there's a whole lot of, you know, vectors of issue that could happen. I mean, Medicine Hat's not necessarily known for the robustness of their power grid and other things, although they do have a very good electricity system. This is just, I don't know. It's just interesting because it's from, I'll call it my
weird
my
news.
hometown.
Like, I don't know. Until I had that conversation with Andy last week, I wasn't thinking about how giant Bitcoin mine farms still existed. Still, it should be historical, right? Like, I don't know. It's just so off our radar that to see something not work makes me wonder what else we are taking for granted within the crypto space.
Yeah, I mean, it would be a lot bigger of an issue if this was like all Bitcoin hash rate at all miners because of some invidious problem or something. But it would be a lot more newsworthy. This is like, I think this is just kind of a testament to some of the limitations of proof of work. It's very, it's a very onerous process relative to proof of stake. Now, there's some arguments why proof of work is more secure, it's more decentralized, yada, yada, blah, blah. Canada is also, at least was really a hotbed for Bitcoin mining because there was not a lot of regulation against it. And you could be close to power generation and actually get incredible deals on power generation. Mm-hmm. And it was a huge problem for the environmentalists for the longest time. Now it's becoming a bit less of a problem. It's less than 50% now that's non-renewable energy that's used for Bitcoin globally, which is obviously also interesting. I know in this particular place, the city gave fairly significant tax breaks to this company to build the mine there. And also, as the city of Medicine Hat is also one of the major power providers, again, random tidbit of information. The city, it's one of the few cities that they themselves own a power distribution system, and they own power generation all over the province, which is crazy. So they actually gave fairly steep discounts. The downside to that is you don't have a multinational managing your power grid. You've got a city, a very aging city, of essentially a bunch of retired farmers that are trying to manage
brewers.
it.
There's a flourishing craft beer scene somehow in Medicine Hat.
Yeah, well, it used to be oil and gas only. That's all that was ever there. And
now it's Bitcoin and beer.
Bitcoin, beer, and medical and recreational marijuana. They have some of the biggest marijuana facilities in Medicine Hat.
Well, it's big. It's big, cheap land. Okay, JD.
All right. Hey,
have you subscribed to our show?
Yeah, probably. I'm pretty sure. Yes, I have. Of course I have. But everybody else needs to like, subscribe, share, do all that shit, because we need to help share the love with more people, dispel some FUD, calm people down from the FOMO, and keep everybody.
I don't know. You're pretty funny today.
I am kind of funny today, but I'm being realistic. I think that's the point. I'm not being hyperbolic. I'm explaining it with objective reasoning, which is what most of these articles don't do. So funny or not, I'm trying to be a realist. Anyways, so like and share and subscribe and all that stuff. Monday to Friday, same time, same place, 12:30 p.m. Eastern. Kiara, go find yourself.
Go find yourself.